Welcome to Tales by Jin. I'm Jin, and you're listening to the Tales of Lux and Cor Gwyndolyn series. This is Adolescence Part 2, the 5th episode in the series. Sit back, relax, and let yourself be whisked away as we return to the world of Tenebrae to follow Gwyndolyn on her continued adventures in the Dragon Wastes of Cor and beyond. Many in the clan considered the completion of Gwyn's first raid to be nothing short of a miracle. Multiple miracles, in fact. The largest of those being that Gwyndolyn did something for the clan that didn't result in abject, catastrophic failure. Which, of course, was followed by the fact that Alec and Willem went on a raid with 3 members and came back with 3 members. They may not have brought much of value back to the clan beyond troll goods, which were already common enough given their proximity to the wastes, but they did bring back the 3rd body they left with, and thus were not exiled from the clan. On the other hand, others began to approach Gwyn about scouting for their groups. It was only somewhat of an annoyance, because while she'd rather not feed into the system she despised, it was the only way to safely cross the wastes and find out more about the world beyond, and still have what passed as a place with food and shelter to return to after. When approached, she only had one stipulation before she would join a party. Once they arrived at the Bordergrass, she would be left to scout unbothered and unfollowed. The early groups that sought her out were, of course, suspect of the demand, but the results spoke for themselves, and soon that suspicion dissolved along with the apprehension of even approaching Gwyndolyn in the first place. Her treatment was still a far cry from being accepted, but at least most of the clan wasn't obviously trying to avoid her these days. No matter how many raids she went on with however many different kobolds, the first always weighed heavy on her mind, not because of who she was with, or because of helpless trolls she was complicit in slaughtering on that day, but because of what that shadow beast dropping said to her in her moment of weakness. I actually have the abilities I'm known for. It was a truth that sent static shivers through her bones. Apart from the shaman publicly making the claim on her proving day, and, well, the whole exploding the shaman's arm off with lightning from her mouth, Gwyn hadn't really been able to summon lightning to even a minor degree, let alone like magical adepts like Chris and Willem. She might have felt a minor tingle or shock here and there throughout her years, but nothing capable of literally disarming someone with a single blast like that day. Those with such weak magical ability tended to get relegated to physical work and training with weaponry, which, given Gwyn's powerful thunder thighs, was a small leap of logic to make in her case. But she often wondered if, like many other aspects of her clan, maybe their approach to magic was all wrong. Maybe different kobolds required different methods to realize their magical potential. She wasn't sure what those methods could be, but maybe, just maybe, forcing kobolds to manifest their magic as tools for battle and only as tools for battle wasn't going to work for everyone. Judge a paintbrush on its ability to stab, and of course, it's going to develop a complex about its capabilities when compared to a knife. To that end, she scouted alone. Well, more alone than necessary. She knew how quick her kind could be to attack when a prospective target was found. Her first raid taught her that. So, to avoid camps being burned or crushed or washed away or otherwise destroyed immediately upon discovery, she scouted well out of reach of the rest of her party. And that was how she discovered a traveling troupe that, for reasons known only to them, thought it would be wise to set up camp this close to kobold territory and rehearse their routine for multiple days straight. To be fair, it was a fairly scenic spot that, if Gwyn was honest with herself, was not all that close to the Bordergrass. The camp itself abutted a short cliff that a gnarled, drooping tree grew from, forming a wooded overhang that kept them sheltered from prying eyes in the dim veil light of the day. But day was also when they practiced. It was through them that Gwyndolyn discovered dance. The troupe consisted of a satyr, a wood nymph, a goblin, and a harpy. The satyr provided music with various instruments he pulled as needed from his overstuffed pack. The harpy sang with a voice that resonated with and enhanced whatever the satyr was playing at the moment. The wood nymph danced with silks that seemed to defy gravity as she twisted and twirled about. And the goblin directed them all, stopping them to say things Gwyn didn't understand and sometimes scratching things in a folded bit of leather they held. But the one that drew Gwyn's attention almost to the exclusion of all else was the wood nymph. There was something hypnotizing in the way she moved, the way her silk snaked about her person and through the air as if alive with a mind of its own. Even on days with little to no wind, they flitted about as if the air was where they belonged. Gwyn was almost certain that, even if she wasn't sure how, this wood nymph was dancing with magic. She was seeing magic used not to maim, not to harm, but to complement the movements of the body of this wood nymph, and it was enthralling. Days passed with Gwyn spying on this troupe, and before she could stop herself, she found herself thinking, "I want to do that. I want to be beautiful, like her." She shook her head vigorously, as though that would dislodge the impossible thought. She was a kobold. Even if she wanted to learn that foreign mystic art, she couldn't just go up and ask them. At best, they'd run. At worst, they'd kill her. Try to kill her, anyway. All she could do was watch from afar. And maybe mimic the movements. Just a little bit. From a vantage point where she could see them, but they couldn't see her. That made seeing specifics difficult, but she didn't have much of a choice. It was this or nothing at all. And she was very satisfied with this, because she found the more she practiced the movements, the more she felt a buzzing, tingling sensation throughout her entire body. Whatever these movements were, something in her body was reacting to them. For the first time in her life, she could consciously feel magic welling up in her. Not enough to blow off an arm or even fire off sparks from the tip of her claws, but it was there. She could do magic. She just had to find the right outlet. "Oh, finally, this is where you've been. We've been looking all over for you. You've been gone so long we thought, well, what do we have here?" Gwyn's stomach fell to the tip of her tail. She'd completely forgotten the main reason she was out here and had lost herself to her discovery. "No, this isn't... I haven't finished scouting. What are you doing here? I thought I made it clear I wasn't to be followed." "Do you have any idea how long you've been gone? We thought you died or something and came looking." How long? How long have I..." "Honestly, stopped counting after 10 days. But rations are getting low, so we thought we either find you or go back. And Sybil here thought we should at least make an attempt. So here we are, and here you are holding this juicy find. Don't worry though. Now that we're here, we'll take care of it and be back at the clan in no time. Good work, Gwyndolyn." The kobold smiled, clasped Gwyn on the shoulder, and charged forward with Sybil. The unsuspecting troop was dead in minutes. The harpy's sweet song cut short by a bolt of ice to the throat. The satyr tried to defend himself with his lute, but the practiced strikes of a kobold shortsword tore it, and him, to ribbons. The goblin tried to run, flinging their book aside in favor of preserving their life, but they didn't get far before they found their feet frozen to the ground, and then found themselves without feet once the kobold with the sword caught up. Only the wood nymph managed to put up much of a fight. She fended off most of the incoming ice projectiles with blasts of wind whipped from the ends of her silks. Once the sword came into play, her silks became mysteriously difficult to cut wherever it struck. The sword kobold increased the ferocity of his strikes in response, and, eventually, the magic-infused silken barrier fell. The sword pierced the wood nymph through the chest, as did a few bolts of ice, for good measure. With the brief scuffle ended, Sybil and the sword kobold rifled through the troop's belongings. Anything deemed useful to the clan, foodstuffs, tools, practical bits of clothing and travel packs, and so on, was stuffed into anything that could hold other things and be carried distances without too much difficulty. Everything else remained ruined and scattered beneath a gnarled tree, including the bodies. Just like the trolls on Gwyn's first raid. And, just like that time, Gwyn did nothing but watch the entire time as the tingling magical energy she had felt building up within her drained away. Hey, Gwyndolyn, you alright? You just kinda zoned out there on us. Fine by me, means I get to kill more. But, you don't look so great. Gwyn cleared her throat, licked at the parched roof of her mouth, but there was no moisture to be found. She cleared her throat again.
I'm fine. Sorry. Go on ahead. I'll make sure there isn't anything left to salvage and catch up.
Don't think we left anything of worth, but sure thing, whatever you say. See you on the other side of the Bordergrass.
Yeah.
Gwyn waited until the sound of the two kobolds crashing through the grass with their spoils faded from earshot. Then she waited longer, until she was absolutely sure there wouldn't be any more surprises from her kind. Each foot felt like several tons of Christopher's crystal were attached to them as she trudged towards the ruined camp. Each step echoed with the sounds of the satyr's percussive rhythms, the lilting of the harpy's sing-song voice, the barked directions and quill scritchings of the goblin. She fell to her knees before the blood-stained silks of the wood nymph, took them gently in her claws. Why did she feel like this? She was a kobold. This is what kobolds did. They kill. They take. They survive. It was all they knew. They couldn't change if they wanted. They didn't write. They didn't have music, art. They didn't sing, didn't dance. They fought and they lived. Why?
If these are the things we see when we raid, why are we like this? Why aren't we curious? Why can't we learn? Why is it so wrong to want to be more than little death machines out for royal blood? To be more than what we are? Why do we have to kill everything not like us? Why? Why? Why are we like this?
The tear that fell on the silk surprised Gwyn. She thought it was blood at first, but she wasn't involved in the combat. The troop had no idea she was around, or that she had been watching them, even once their deaths were upon them. She sniffed, and another tear fell, mixing with the blood of the wood nymph in the silk. Lifting that specific part of the silk, she wiped her eyes.
We don't have to be like this. I don't have to be like this,
she thought as she stood, silks in hand.
What I felt was real. I could feel my magic welling up in me when I performed those movements. Maybe if I can learn these movements and present this method of harnessing magic to the elders at a meet, maybe I can show them that there is more to the world than what we think we know.
Closing her eyes, Gwyn focused on her memories of the movements she watched the Dryad perform time and time again over the past 10 days. She willed her body to move as her mind's eye remembered, and her body jerkily responded. A twitch of the wrists here, a shake of the hips there, a wiggle of this, a waggle of that, spin, and... what was she doing? Nothing her body was doing was matching what she saw in her mind. Moreover, that welling of magical energy wasn't happening like before. Mirroring what she saw was one thing, but recalling from memory and producing the action was somehow different. Her body didn't want to move in the ways her mind knew she should, and that disconnect was frustrating. Why wouldn't her body just do what she saw in her head? Wait. In her memories, it wasn't just the wood nymph moving however she wished. Sometimes she spoke with the goblin, and sometimes the goblin interrupted her, said something, and scratched in their leather fold. And then the movements were slightly different. Maybe that fold of leather was the key. Stuffing the silks into a pouch, Gwyn dashed over to where the leather fold had fallen. Luckily, the other two had no interest in it, and it hadn't sustained much damage beyond being a little scuffed from being tossed. Gwyn opened it up and found it to be full of leaves of paper covered in various markings. The pages appeared to be divided into sections based on the markings. There was a section with lots of circles attached to sticks and flags placed up and down lines that ran across the entire page. There was another section like that one, but this one had what must be written words under the strange line notations. But the most important section was the last one. It contained depiction after depiction of a figure twirling, spinning, moving, just like Gwyn had seen the wood nymph move. Even if she couldn't understand the rest of the book, or the scratchings that surrounded the depictions, she could move like the pictures indicated. That, combined with the images in her head, would be more than enough. It had to be. Gwyndolyn of the Shadowscale clan stuffed the book into the pouch with the lengths of silk, grinning as she ran into the Bordergrass. With this, she finally had what she needed. She would perfect this dance, call a meet with the elders, and show kobold kind that they could be so much more if they let themselves. She would show Chris something beautiful. In all of the wastes, at least the parts under the claim of Gwyn's clan, there was one place she knew of where she could be alone and far from prying eyes, where even the most daring kobold would never go. Not out of fear or any such base and shameful feeling, but because the cave in question belonged to her parents, a pair of kobolds who, apparently, were such a huge shame to the clan that the shaman herself condemned them. Her parents were supposedly so much of an embarrassment that they weren't even afforded the simplest of burial rites upon their passing, just left embracing one another in the very back of their cave, mummified by the arid atmosphere of the wastes and untouched by what few scavenging creatures were hardy enough to call the wastes home. To the clan, this was a symbol, a message to all detailing exactly what happened when you outlived your usefulness to your clanmates and your very existence became an embarrassment to the Shadowscale name. To Gwyn, it was a waste of perfectly good living space in an already resource-scarce environment. Stupid elders. Tucked away in the depths of her parents' old cave, Gwyn pored over the book and practiced dancing with the silks. Every free moment was spent studying the book and mimicking the motions therein. Days bled into weeks, weeks blurred into months. Bit by bit, moment by moment, her motions became less jerky, more fluid. The silks, while they didn't defy gravity quite like how they did for the wood nymph, flowed with her form instead of tangling and tripping her up. But still, that flow of magic from within had yet to return. What was she missing? Exhausted, Gwyn slumped to the floor of her parents' cave, a puddle of gray-blue scales. As far as she could understand, she was following the drawings correctly. Her form matched theirs. She couldn't read the notes, but that didn't matter, right? She hadn't read anything when she was just watching and copying before. What was so different now from then? She huffed, blowing up a cloud of dust off the cave floor just in front of her nostrils. Think back to that time. What was she doing then that she wasn't doing now? Think. What motions were different? Think. The curve of her body? Think. The flow of the silks from her wrists? Think. 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 Oh, that's it. Gwyn pushed herself up from the floor, an electric smile crackling across her lips. Back then, she wasn't thinking at all. Wasn't thinking, wasn't trying, only watching and feeling. That had to be the key. Feeling. She had spent months practicing at this point. She didn't need to think. She knew the motions down to the tip of her tail. All she had to do now was let it happen. Let it flow. Gwyn took a deep breath, closed her eyes, squeezed the silks and claw, and danced. Mind empty, she let her body flow from form to form. Every spin, every twirl, every flick of the tail and twist of the silk was born not of conscious thought bludgeoning shape into being, but of feeling, coaxing flow from form she knew deep in her muscles and bones. As she moved free of obstructing thought, that same feeling from when she watched that troupe all those months ago bubbled forth and welled up within her. Her arms swept out wide and the silks trailed along behind, tracing the path of her undulations. Every kick and step was born of a grace no kobold had ever known before. She moved with pride, with purpose, and with the very thing she discovered watching that troupe. Hope. Hope swelled in her heart, and so too did that feeling of magic surging from within. But this feeling was nothing like the rampaging energy that threatened to tear her apart from the inside, lest she expel it at the nearest target like her proving day battle with the shaman. This was a warm buzzing that washed from her core to her extremities in measured, controlled waves. Not wanting to lose this feeling, Gwyn continued dancing with her eyes closed, but increased the fervor of her movements. The buzzing in her body intensified in response. Next, she slowed her movements to a more relaxed, purposeful pace. The buzzing softened in kind. Giddy with her discovery, she opened her eyes, and nearly squeaked in surprise at what she saw. The position she had stopped in was a pose where her arms were extended. The silks, wrapped around her thick forearms and fed through the palm of her claws, should have been falling to rest at her feet now that she was no longer manipulating them. But they hung in the air, humming with energy as they lazily snaked through the air before her. Without realizing it, she had channeled her lightning through the silks, just like the wood nymph channeled wind through them to move them according to her will. She was doing it. She was actually using magic. In her excitement, Gwyn lost concentration on that buzzing feeling within, and the silks dropped, claimed by gravity once more. She tried whipping them back up, but they remained limp. She shook harder. Nothing. In the quiet of the cave, Gwyn chuckled to herself. Of course it wouldn't be that easy. But now she knew. Even a failure like her could control magic. All it took was years of suffering and an outsider art she admittedly didn't fully understand. But this was proof that the elders were wrong. There was more to life than fighting and surviving and killing outsiders for what we can scavenge off of them. We could learn. We could dance. We could uplift everyone in the clan, not just those proficient in combat. Everyone had value. No one was a waste. No more lives needed to be thrown away. All we had to do was look outside. Once more, Gwyn grinned, and electricity briefly crackled across her scales. She would perfect this art, this dancing, and once she had full control of her magic through it, she would approach the elders about a meet. She would show them, show the entire clan, what kobolds lacked, what kobolds could be. And if they still refused to see, well, with her legs and full control of her lightning magic, who could stop her? They would see, they had to see, and then they would change, or she would carve out a space for herself where she could live free and unfettered from tradition and the shackles of the past. Her own clan, just like she promised Chris years ago. She closed her eyes and let the hope welling in her heart guide her once more. Thank you for listening to this episode of Tales of Lux and Cor, Gwyndolyn. If you liked what you've heard, please be sure to like the video and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to make sure you're notified when new episodes come out. Thanks for stopping by, and may your cave be ever warm.